You are standing in your kitchen on a quiet Sunday morning, waiting for your coffee to brew. The sunlight is streaming through the window. You have a roof over your head, food in the fridge, and for a brief moment, you feel a profound sense of peace. Your life is objectively good. Then, your phone vibrates on the counter. You pick it up and open a social media app. Instantly, your screen is flooded with an update. An old friend from college just bought a massive new home. Another peer just announced a prestigious promotion. Someone younger than you just launched a wildly successful business. In less than 10 seconds, the peace evaporates. A cold, heavy stone drops into your stomach. Your perfectly fine life suddenly feels incredibly small, embarrassing, and fundamentally inadequate. You spend the rest of the morning mentally tearing apart your own choices, wondering where you went so wrong. You allowed a glowing rectangle to completely annihilate your gratitude. Before we dive in, remember this video is for educational purposes only. Welcome to the channel, where we explore the hidden psychology behind our everyday behaviors. We tend to brush off this behavior. We tell ourselves that comparison is just human nature, a fleeting moment of jealousy that everyone experiences. But think of your brain like a high-precision internal navigation system. A healthy navigation system calculates your position, your speed, and your destination based entirely on your own coordinates. But in the modern world, your internal navigation has developed a severe operational error. It has stopped calculating your route based on where you are actually going. Instead, it constantly recalibrates your speed by measuring the speed of every vehicle in the lanes beside you. If a sports car suddenly speeds past you at 100 miles an hour, your internal system sounds a deafening alarm, screaming that you are falling hopelessly behind, even though you are driving at the exact safe speed needed to reach your own chosen destination. You are no longer navigating your own life. You are simply reacting to the erratic traffic around you. Running this flawed calculation thousands of times slowly rewires your emotional baseline. Repeated behaviors and thought patterns can deeply influence our emotional responses, our expectations, our habits, and our self-perception. This does not mean your personality is permanently broken. The goal here is to explain how this gradual influence works so you can reprogram your internal navigation and teach your brain a completely new way to calculate your worth. You are scrolling through a lifestyle feed or professional network. You see people your age traveling to exotic destinations, securing venture capital, or buying luxury cars. You feel an immediate suffocating wave of inadequacy. It is remarkably easy to justify this behavior. We tell our friends that we are just looking for inspiration. We convince our logical minds that observing extreme success fuels our ambition, framing our digital self-torture as a noble pursuit of excellence. In reality, you are caught in the grip of upward social comparison. Humans have an evolutionary drive to evaluate their social ranking, a concept known as social comparison theory. When you observe someone performing better than you, your brain registers an immediate threat to your status. But modern technology has weaponized this instinct. You are not comparing your real life to your neighbor's real life. You are comparing your messy, unedited, behind-the-scenes reality to someone else's meticulously curated, heavily filtered highlight reel. The cost of this mental glitch is that your emotional state becomes dependent on an absolute illusion. You demand a standard of perfection that does not exist in reality. If you focus solely on the highlight reel, you systematically train your brain to ignore the genuine beauty and stability of your own life. What does this habit give you today, and what might it cost you tomorrow? You are not simply seeking inspiration. You have trained yourself to use ambition as a respectable excuse to obsess over feeling inadequate. What have you been practicing without realizing it, And if you practiced celebrating your own messy progress without looking at a screen for the next year, what might become easier? You are having lunch with friends, and the conversation shifts to a mutual acquaintance who recently lost their job, suffered a financial catastrophe, or went through a public breakup. You actively lean into the gossip. You ask for specific details. Deep down, you feel a sudden secret rush of warmth and relief. We instinctively disguise this toxic relief as empathy. We nod sympathetically and utter performative phrases about how tragic the situation is. We convince ourselves that we are simply being caring, observant friends sharing concern. Beneath that polite facade lies the dark psychology of downward social comparison and schadenfreude. When your internal self-esteem is chronically unstable, witnessing someone else's failure provides an immediate artificial boost to your ego. Your brain creates a temporary sense of security by looking at someone who has fallen below you on the social ladder. It is a cheap, instant hit of dopamine. The problem is that what gives you temporary comfort today completely rots your capacity for genuine connection tomorrow. If your self-worth requires others to fail, you will eventually begin to subconsciously sabotage your closest relationships. You will surround yourself with misery just to feel successful. If you repeatedly use the misfortune of others to prop up your ego, true, supportive friendship will become impossible. Gossiping likely gave you a cheap sense of belonging in insecure environments in the past. But what does this habit give you today? And what might it cost you tomorrow? You are not naturally malicious. You have simply practiced using other people's pain as a stepping stone because you are terrified of your own inadequacy. What have you been practicing without realizing it? And if you practiced finding your worth internally rather than through the failures of others for the next year, what might become easier? Notice what is happening here. None of these behaviors look like conscious self-destruction. They look like ambition. They look like empathy. They look like normal social habits. That is precisely why they are so powerful. The things that shape us are not always massive, earth-shattering traumatic events. Sometimes they are the quiet, invisible ways we process everyday friction. By this point, you might be noticing something deeply uncomfortable. Letting someone else's success ruin your day doesn't feel like a conscious decision anymore. It feels like an automated reflex. It feels like who you are. That is the strange reality of repetition. At first, you react to the stimulus. Eventually, the reaction becomes an automatic sequence. But an automatic sequence can absolutely be rewritten. A habit can influence your personality without defining your core identity. Recognizing this pattern is not a reason to shame yourself. It is a profound reason to finally become conscious of it. You finally achieve a massive financial milestone. You land a major promotion, or you manage to save 50,000 USD in your bank account. You should feel ecstatic. But as soon as you enter the new tax bracket or move into a nicer neighborhood, you look around. Your new peers have bigger houses, luxury sports cars, and significantly more expensive watches. Instantly, your massive achievement feels like loose pocket change. You feel completely broke all over again. It is remarkably easy to rationalize this chronic dissatisfaction. We tell ourselves that we are just setting new goals. We claim that we are hungry for growth and refuse to settle for mediocrity. We frame our chronic discontent as the ultimate hallmark of a driven individual. This is where the psychology of relative deprivation and the hedonic treadmill becomes profoundly relevant. The human brain adapts to new baseline circumstances rapidly. Once you achieve a goal, the dopamine spike fades, and your brain immediately shifts the goalposts to match your new environment. Relative deprivation means you do not evaluate your wealth based on your actual physical survival needs. You evaluate it strictly based on what the person next to you possesses. Sabotaging your own joy By constantly moving the goalposts ensures that you will never arrive at genuine peace. You are running an endless marathon, where the finish line sprints away from you every time you get close. If you repeatedly base your success on external markers, feeling satisfied will begin to feel like a dangerous trap. The habit of constantly striving likely kept you motivated when you had nothing. But what does this habit give you today? And what might it cost you tomorrow? You do not lack gratitude. You have aggressively practiced shifting the goalposts to avoid the vulnerability of simply being happy with what you currently have. What have you been practicing without realizing it? And if you practiced sitting with your achievements without looking at the next rung on the ladder for the next year, what might become easier? You post a creative project, an essay, or a photo online. You check your phone 5 minutes later. Only 2 likes. You check it an hour later. 10 likes. You look at a peer's post from the same day, and it has 500 likes. You immediately delete your post, feeling a burning, humiliating sense of shame and social rejection. We brush this off by claiming we are just curating our personal brand. We tell ourselves that we only want high-quality engagement on our feeds, or that we are just being mindful of the algorithm. We disguise our desperate hunger for validation as digital professionalism. This touches the absolute core of Goodhart's law applied to human psychology. The law states that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. When you start quantifying your human worth through likes, followers, or bank balances, your brain begins to optimize entirely for those numbers. You lose touch with your intrinsic values. You stop creating art, sharing authentic thoughts, or living genuinely, and instead, you become a performing monkey dancing for the approval of an indifferent crowd. If you repeatedly outsource your self-esteem to digital metrics, you may gradually become more comfortable with a fake, highly rated persona than your authentic self. If you repeatedly let the crowd dictate your worth, trusting your own internal compass will feel like an impossible myth. Seeking applause likely protected you from social isolation in the past. But what does this habit give you today, and what might it cost you tomorrow? You are not naturally shallow. You have simply practiced using numbers to measure your soul because qualitative, internal self-love feels too ambiguous. What have you been practicing without realizing it? And if you practiced creating things entirely for yourself without checking a single metric for the next year, what might become easier? You are attending a wedding, a baby shower, or a graduation party for a peer. Everyone is celebrating. You smile, clap, and take photos. But inside, you are paralyzed by quiet panic. You feel like time is running out. You feel like you have missed the train, and you are standing alone on an empty platform while everyone else travels toward fulfillment. It sounds incredibly mature to say we are just taking stock of our lives. We tell ourselves that seeing others succeed is a necessary wake-up call to get our lives together. We call this suffocating panic self-reflection. This brings us to the deepest layer of the fear of being left behind and our evolutionary dread of exile. Thousands of years ago, falling to the bottom of the tribal hierarchy meant literal death. You received the worst food, the least protection, and you were the most exposed to predators. When you see peers hitting life milestones before you, your primal brain interprets this as a severe drop in your social ranking, triggering an intense survival alarm. When you let the ancient fear of exile dictate your modern potential, you make desperate, destructive choices. You rush into the wrong relationships, take jobs you hate, and force yourself into an artificial mold, all to keep up with an invisible clock. You forfeit the beautiful process of living your own timeline just to avoid the temporary discomfort of feeling different. What does this habit give you today, and what might it cost you tomorrow? You are not behind in life. You have practiced comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20 so relentlessly that your brain believes patience is a death sentence? What have you been practicing without realizing it? And if you practice trusting your own timeline, despite the noise around you for the next year, what might become easier? There is a deeper truth underneath all of this comparison. We have been culturally conditioned to believe that life is a zero-sum game. We are taught that someone else's success is a direct indictment of our failure. We mistake constant comparison for ambition, and we mistake exhaustion for progress. But refusing to measure your life against a stranger's highlight reel is not giving up. It is emotional sovereignty. Understanding the difference between who you are and the flawed navigation system you have been running is the key to untangling your identity from external validation. Changing your response does not mean you become a stagnant, ambitionless person who refuses to grow. It simply means giving yourself more choices. A steering wheel doesn't decide where a car must go. It simply gives the driver the ability to change direction when the road curves. Awareness works in a similar way. Realizing that you have been practicing the habit of letting comparison consume you does not instantly teleport you to a place of perfect confidence, but it gives you agency. It gives you the steering wheel back. Why does any of this matter? Because the small choices you make every single day are quietly building the architecture of your future mind. One day doesn't define you. One moment of envy doesn't define you. One deleted post doesn't define you. One bad habit doesn't define you. But what you repeatedly return to deserves your absolute attention. The quiet ways you obsess over others' success, the subtle ways you discard your own progress, the invisible ways you shrink your life to fit an artificial timeline, these are not insignificant simply because they are small. They are repeated, and repetition accumulates into a life. What are you practicing becoming? When you look at the life you have built and the immense power you have quietly handed over to the people around you, are you practicing emotional fragility, or are you practicing resilience? You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to run your own race. You are allowed to remain completely unbothered. Because perhaps the person you become isn't decided in one dramatic, flawless moment of finally being universally successful. Perhaps they are being shaped quietly, gently, and inevitably in the things you do again tomorrow.